So I'm doing this live stream today on single payer. I've been doing a lot of live streams on single payer and specifically HR 676, which I've been advocating for, the John Conyers Medicare for All bill that he's been introducing for 14 years, and also SB 562, which is California's single payer bill that was introduced by Ricardo Lara and Tony Atkins. Now, people may know, if they've been following my streams or just following the news out of California, that last Friday, at the end of business, Ricardo Lara basically announced that he was going to hold SB 562 in the Rules Committee, which is meeting today, because it was, quote unquote, woefully inadequate. And he gave a whole bunch of reasons, mostly that the financing piece was not in place. Now, that is a bullshit excuse because the financing piece was coming later. It was always intended that the framework would get approved first, that this would be a 2-year bill, that the framework would get approved first, and the financing would be added during the process. And the nurses, which sponsored this bill, just issued a report by UMass Amherst, in which they explained exactly how this could be financed, and it actually would save Californians $38 billion a year over what they're already paying. And they threw out this ridiculous number of $400 billion, which is more than the state budget, and they're all using that as for their talking points. Now, I don't want to get into a defense of the financing because we discussed that on an earlier video and also on my show the other night with some activists. But what I do want to talk about is what are the Democrats really up to here? We had a protest at Ricardo Lara's office in Southgate 2 days ago, and there were over 300 people there. And the only mainstream media outlet that was covering it was Telemundo, Channel 34. None of the broadcast stations were covering it. As a matter of fact, it was reported that Channel 7's news truck drove by and didn't even stop. So apparently they sent someone and decided, for whatever reason, that they weren't going to cover it. And I tweeted Alex Michelson, who's the political reporter, and I said that it was shameful that they were not covering this story, which is, 70% of Californians want single-payer health care, and basically the Democratic Party activists were revolting against their own leaders for his failure to put this forward. And he replied to me that he was covering the national story about how the Senate did not have the votes to repeal Obamacare, and we're going to delay it till after the July 4th recess. To which I replied that this was part of the national story because this is the entire reason why we decided to bring it forward this year. With the ACA being jeopardized, California felt we had our biggest chance to get single payer here in California, which is the 6th largest economy in the world. They make excuses. They talk about Vermont, but Vermont was too small of a state. And California is somewhere where they could get enough people to make this viable. And as I've said before, this is how it happened in Canada. First, Saskatchewan, which is a province, put it forward, and then all the other provinces followed suit. So I believe that this is the way to get single payer. I know that Kevin Zeese and Margaret Flowers disagree with me. They think there are too many obstacles. And yes, there are obstacles, but there were plenty of obstacles to getting women the right to vote, for getting blacks the right to vote, for getting us out of the Vietnam War, for getting, the 8-hour day, for eliminating child labor. I mean, there were many obstacles to many of these things, but if you just say that there are obstacles and that you don't fight, then where are you? So basically, Anthony Rendon said this thing on Friday, and we immediately pushed back. There was a rally at his office in Southgate, as I said. We did a die-in. There was a great street theater. You can find it on my Facebook page, in which Cliff Tasner played the insurance industry, and another young man played Anthony Rendon, and he was carrying 2 water bottles. And the whole purpose was that he was carrying water for the insurance industry because he has accepted over $700,000 is the latest figure in campaign contributions from the health insurance industry, big pharma, and other healthcare companies. So, but I don't really think that's the main reason. I think the main reason is that Jerry Brown does not support single payer now, even though he did back in 1992 when he was running for president against Bill Clinton. There's a great clip that I put into one of my live streams, and I'll put it in the comments here, of him actually debating Bill Clinton on the Phil Donahue show, in which he made pretty much our case for why we need single payer. So Jerry Brown did not want, Maureen Cruz, who's the director of Healthcare for All Los Angeles, told me that several years ago he said he did not want to be embarrassed by having to veto a single payer bill. So he basically put Anthony Rendon up to be the fall guy. And when I called Anthony Rendon's office the other day, I said, he should realize that there are memes being created against him. They're, showing how he got the $700,000 from the industry, how there are recall petitions being set up. The hashtag recall Rendon is trending. Why would he want to be the fall guy for Jerry Brown? We know that the leadership all, has each other's backs. Who knows if Kevin DeLeon is even in support of this, really? And this is just the Democrats and how they operate. So Nancy Pelosi has said that single payer, this is their line. I've been a single payer advocate for, my whole lifetime. Rendon said it. I've been a single payer advocate for 20 years. Nancy Pelosi said she was a single payer advocate her whole lifetime, but she doesn't think it's going to pass. And she actually thought that it would happen in the states. But has she come forward to support 562? No, not once have I seen a public statement from her trying to get legislators in California to support 562, or even, talking it up amongst the public. Adam Schiff, we lobbied him. I was going to town hall meetings and trying to get these congresspeople to sign on as co-sponsors to H.R. 676, John Conyers' bill. He finally signed on June 22nd, last weekend. But when he did his live stream yesterday talking about the ACA, he never once mentioned that single payer was the ultimate solution. The same thing with Indivisible. They are having these calls, Indivisible and Move On, to lobby calls for we, the people, should be lobbying our representatives in Congress and the Senate to vote down, the Trump care, but never once did they mention single payer, because perhaps their biggest donors are Priorities USA and George Soros. And they just care about getting Democrats. They don't care if they're progressive Democrats or if they support progressive legislation. Hillary Clinton said single payer will never, ever happen. She almost said that gleefully during the campaign. In 1994, when advocating for a comprehensive health care reform as First Lady, Clinton told reporters that if Congress didn't pass a reform bill that year, the nation would eventually embrace a single-payer plan. Quote, if for whatever reason the Congress doesn't pass health care reform, I believe, and I may be totally off base on this, but I believe that by the year 2000, we will have a single-payer system. I don't even think it's a close call politically. I think the momentum for a single-payer system will sweep the country. It will be such a huge popular issue that even if it is not successful the first time, it will eventually be. So this is Hillary Clinton back in 1994. So what changed? Well, obviously, the health insurance industry and their campaign donations changed her and changed the rest of the Democratic Party. Tom Perez, when he was asked on Chris Hayes, he was doing the Unity Tour with Bernie Sanders, he was asked if he embraced single payer, and he couldn't even say yes. He mouthed some platitudes about how health care should be a right, not a privilege, and couldn't even, agree with single payer. And Dianne Feinstein also is going around the country, well, not going around the country, but in her 2 town halls, basically said she doesn't support single payer because she considers it government-run health care, when that is a Republican talking point. It's not government run. You still get to use your own doctors and your own hospitals, and they still make the decisions. It is a government insurance program, so there is only one payer. And that's what they have in most of the other advanced industrialized countries. The fact that we don't have it in this country is really disgusting. Now, I was very hopeful about SB 562 because I consider the nurses pretty savvy. And I thought that they would not be introducing something unless they thought it had a good chance to pass. And so I was a little concerned that there was no financing. I think it would have been better maybe if they had done this UMass study first before they introduced the bill. But timing is the way timing is. And it did come out right before the Senate, voted on SB 562, and they did vote to approve it. So Anthony Rendon was fully aware of how this would save money, how this would be paid for. And if he wanted it, these things to be ironed out, he would have let it advance to the Health Committee and then the Appropriations Committee where they could have inputted into it. There is nothing in the rules that say only the Senate can improve this bill. There is no reason why the Assembly couldn't have worked on it as well. So now, I'm turning my attention to the authors, Ricardo Lara and Tony Atkins. So it kind of concerned me after I saw that Anthony Rendon said all these things that I didn't see any press releases from the author of the bill, who's Ricardo Lara. And what I did see was in the Sacramento Bee, let's see, which day was this? June 28th. Maybe it was yesterday or 2 days ago. Let's see, they're quoting Rendon. It didn't make any sense. It didn't seem like public policy as much as it seemed like a statement of principles. Yeah, so what's wrong with a statement of principles? Could cost Rendon politically in the long run, especially if SB 562 ultimately fails. That's right, people. Recall Rendon. Hashtag recall Rendon. And here's the part. Its authors confirmed the bill is finished for the legislative session but could return next year. Okay, so if you were an author of this bill and you were really fighting for it, would you concede so quickly? Why wouldn't you make a public statement pushing back on what he said? On Sunday last week at the Pacific Palisades Dem Club Forum on single payer, Ben Allen, who was one of the co-authors, basically repeated all of Anthony Rendon's talking points. And thank God that Paul Song, who was the co-chair of the Campaign for a Healthy California, was there to refute these talking points. And I found it interesting when I heard this story recounted that the author basically is buying into this BS. And so I called Ricardo Lara's office and I spoke to some staffer and I said, why didn't he issue a press release? And he said to me, the senator is fighting for this bill, in the Assembly. And I said, okay, is he planning to go to the Rules Committee meeting today to fight for it? And he said, quote, the senator is going from committee to committee, and if he has time, he's going to go there. So I said, if he has time, if he's fighting for this bill, he should make time, shouldn't he? And he said, well, if he has time. So then I posted this on Facebook, and someone pointed out to me that they were on his Facebook page, and 13 minutes prior to my conversation, Ricardo Lara posted that he was on his way to the Central Valley Dem Club in Stockton. So basically, the guy out and out lied to me and told me that he was making the rounds of committees. Does this sound like a person who is fighting for their own bill? I think that Ricardo Lara introduced this bill because he's running for insurance commissioner and he wanted to have this on his resume. Look how I, am fighting for single payer. They love to say they're fighting, but what do they actually do to fight when it comes down to it? You know, forget about going to the Rules Committee. He couldn't even issue a press release, you know, rebutting these stupid talking points made by Anthony Rendon. And so I'm going to call, you know, Tony Atkins' office. I can't put it on speaker because it's against the law to tape somebody without their permission, but I'm just going to call her office and find out what they have to say. And I'm going to repeat what her staffer says. Yes, I'd like to know if the policy director for Tony Atkins, the one who works on things like SB 562, is available to talk. She's out of the office? Yes, I'll take her email address, but maybe since I have you on the phone, I can talk to you. You're here to take comments. Great. Okay, well, so my comment is this. She's a co-author of this bill, and yet when Anthony Rendon issued his statement on Friday at the end of business, she did not issue any kind of press release rebutting his talking points. And I read the article in the Sacramento Bee, and in fact, it said that the authors confirmed that it was dead for this year, but it would come up again next year. And I'm wondering why she's not fighting for it. You know, the Rules Committee meeting is today. Is she attending the Rules Committee meeting to fight for it? In the Assembly, yeah. She's on her way back to San Diego?
Yeah, back to the district.
Well, I don't understand what's going on here. Can you maybe clarify for me what's going on from her point of view?
I mean, with the bill?
Yeah, with the bill.
The bill is held in Assembly rules.
Right, but I just...
It's up to the Assembly.
Yeah, it's up to the Assembly, but here's the thing. We had a big rally at Rendon's Southgate office. We had 300 people there. And then there was a huge rally in the Capitol yesterday, and we are fighting for it. The activists are fighting for it. The nurses are fighting for it. Why aren't the authors fighting for it? We understand that the Rules Committee meeting was today, and so we had all week this week to make our case, and that's what we've been doing. So I'm wondering, why are the authors, you know, MIA here? You can't answer on her behalf? She didn't direct the office staff there to, with a comment, to even give to people who are calling about this?
I mean, I can give you the information of the policy director. She would have more information on that.
Okay, what is the information on the policy director? Okay, thank you very much. Well, you can take a message and you can tell the senator that we really expect her to be fighting for her bills. There's too many Democrats right now that are saying, like Rendon, I've been supporting single payer for 20 years, and you know, Nancy Pelosi and Tom Perez and Feinstein, you know, all these people that support it but then don't fight for it. And so my feeling is if she's going to introduce a bill, she's got to go all out to fight for it. Lauren Steiner, and I'm in Beverly Hills. And even though I'm not in her district, I feel I have the... Okay, thank you very much. You too, bye. All right, so there you go, folks. She was very nice. She really didn't have any answers for me. She told me that I should email the policy director, who is Sarah Boot. I think we should be doing that. We should be emailing Rendon and Atkins, and we should be going on their Facebook pages and commenting, we want you to fight for single payer. If you believe in single payer, if you authored this bill, you need to fight for it. And also, Governor Brown, because he's totally behind this. He is totally behind this, and it is outrageous that he gets a pass on this. He also is trying to pretend to be a climate leader when it just came out yesterday that he has been negotiating behind the scenes with the Western States Petroleum Association, and he has received $9.8 million in contributions from oil and gas and energy companies over the past 5 years. And he is basically trying to neuter this bill, SB 775, which is Wyckoffsky's bill. There was a great article in These Times on why the environmental justice organizations are behind this bill. It is to replace the old cap and trade bill, which we now know is a big racket. So we can pollute in California, but we'll save a rainforest somewhere else. How does that stop the people in that community from suffering the ill effects of the pollution? That is BS, and that is a typical market-based solution, a neoliberal solution to solving something like climate change. We need to ban fracking, and we need to keep 80% of fossil fuels in the ground to avoid catastrophic climate change. So there's Jerry Brown over in China pretending to be the big climate leader that Trump is not, when in fact, here he is negotiating with big oil behind our backs to try to screw us on climate change here in California. So let me see if there was any other points I wanted to make. Oh yeah, the media. Now they cannot go either without a pass. So as I mentioned, I tweeted Alex Michelson, who's a political reporter. He said, keep me up to date. I think we need to get all the political reporters on the station, at the stations on these stories. I left a voicemail for this reporter from Michael Lurie, I guess his name is, with the Sacramento station, because he tweeted that he had a picture of him sitting down with Anthony Rendon, and he said, Anthony Rendon is reporting getting death threats. Learn more at 6 o'clock. So I called him to speak to him to find out because I said, I don't live in Sacramento, I didn't see what your report was at 6 o'clock, but I'd like to know if you asked him about the financing piece and how Californians would save $38 billion a year. I'd like to ask him, you to ask him about the $700,000 he accepted from the insurance companies and other health industries. I'd like you to ask him about how he's supporting single payer for 20 years. Why can he not let this go through the process? I said to him that broadcast stations have licenses to operate in the public interest, convenience, and necessity. That was the FCC rule that gave broadcast industries the right to use the public airwaves. And so far, they're just using it for crap. We have a First Amendment in this country. We have a free press, and they're called the Fourth Estate because they are supposed to be giving citizens the information they need to make decisions in a democratic society. And they are not doing that. They are basically giving them bread and circuses, celebrity infotainment, sports, and controversy. And when they talk about politics, it's all about the horse race. It's all about who's up, who's down, sensational crap like death threats to try to tease their broadcast instead of talking about the fact that people are dying, literally dying from lack of health care. And, this business about saving the ACA is bullshit because, as I've said a million times, the ACA is a Republican program cooked up by the right-wing Heritage Foundation, first introduced by Republican Bob Dole, first implemented in Massachusetts by Republican Mitt Romney, and then, foisted on the American people by Barack Obama, who is a big corporatist who campaigned on the public option, basically saying that we would have the public option to keep the insurance companies honest, and then he threw the public option under the bus to get the health insurance industry on board. Okay, the public option is no good. And the final thing that I want to say here in this video is everybody needs to contact Bernie Sanders because he is starting to make noises again about, like he spoke with Planned Parenthood the other day after they supposedly saved the ACA again. It's disgusting to me. They had a rally the first time they saved it in the House, and they were chanting, ho, ho, hey, hey, the ACA is here to stay, taking pleasure in this corporate health insurance program that we have that CEOs can make $17 million, and they make the more money they make. The way they make more money is by denying health care. They call it medical losses when they actually have to pay out a claim. It's called a medical loss on their balance sheet. And these CEOs, they've gone up from 13 to 15 to $17 million a year under Obamacare. So Obamacare, this corporate program that forces Americans to buy a private product that we can't even afford to use, is nothing that we should celebrate saving. We need to get rid of the ACA. We should be repealing and replacing the ACA with single payer. And Bernie has been making noises again about introducing a bill that's going to be a public option. Again, this public option, it is not sustainable, because what happens is all the sick people go into it, and it's not sustainable. The only way to provide universal health care is to have everybody in and nobody out. So the public option, or even lowering the Medicare age, which he's also talking about, from 65 to 55, is not a good idea. And Bernie thinks that this is a way to ease us into single payer. No, it is not, Bernie Sanders. It is a way to delay single payer. You need to be bold. We have to pull off the Band-Aid. This is like pulling the Band-Aid off of a wound. We have to pull the Band-Aid off of private health insurance in this country. We've got to get rid of it once and for all. Bernie, you're always talking about what is immoral and what is obscene. It is immoral and obscene for private companies to profit off of people getting sick and dying. And we've got to stop it right now. So anybody out there who is a supporter of Bernie Sanders needs to tell him that this is what we need to do. He needs to introduce a bill that is an exact duplicate, a companion bill to H.R. 676, John Conyers' single-payer Medicare for all bill that he's been introducing for 14 years. For the first time, we now have over 50% of Democrats signed on as co-sponsors. I was shocked to find out that Adam Schiff, who I spoke to twice, we ambushed him outside of his town hall when he refused to take my question about whether he would co-sign as a sponsor. And then I happened to see him at this Democratic State Convention in Sacramento outside a hotel. And I said, oh, did you have a chance to look at, I think I said, what's happening with your co-signing Conyers' bill? And he says, I'm going to take a look at it. I said, that's what you told me a month ago. You haven't taken a look at it yet? I said, this is ridiculous. I said, if you're going to keep focusing on Russia and not talking about, health care and affordable housing and, an affordable living wage, the things that the American people care about, the Democrats are going to lose in 2018. And you should be using your big platform on cable news to be talking about these things, not the fake news about Russia. So he just kind of mumbled something, and I just walked away from him in disgust. And then his press secretary came up to me and said, oh, do you still want to do an interview with him on your show? And I said, no, I don't want to interview this guy. Forget it. I was so mad at that point that I just walked away from him. But I was pleasantly surprised to see him co-sponsor on June 22nd. So I sent him a thank you tweet. And then, of course, someone shared his video that he made, his Facebook Live video, yesterday celebrating the ACA and talking for however many minutes, 9 minutes, he talked about it. And not once did he talk about the ultimate solution being single-payer Medicare for all. So we have to support that. So I don't know what's going on with these Democrats. We have a 2/3 majority in California in the legislature, which means we can pass a tax increase. And even though there would be a tax increase, people would be paying less, the state would be paying less, everybody would be covered, we would have better coverage. This is such a no-brainer to me. It is in the state Democratic Party platform. These people are all full of shit as far as I'm concerned. They pretend to be progressives, and maybe they're progressives on some other issues, but they're certainly not progressives when it comes to bucking the big entrenched industries like Big Pharma. And you saw how Eric Bauman, who just anointed himself chairman of the California State Democratic Party, they didn't even go through the proper process. The last day of the convention, everybody was protesting, everybody was trying to get a recount, a revote. All these different motions were being made. They were all being ruled out of order. They never officially declared him the state chairman. He has declared himself in a tweet, and he's been acting as the state chairman. Don't forget that Eric Bauman took $12,500 a month for Big Pharma, during the campaign of Prop 61 to lobby against that bill. And this is the guy who is now the chairman of he's declared himself the chairman, and Kimberly Ellis has alleged fraud, and she's actually pointed to specific instances. The update on that, just to digress a little bit, is that the Compliance Review Commission did agree to do an audit. It's going to be an internal audit. It's not going to be an independent audit, which would have been preferable. But they're basically agreeing to all the things that Margarita LeCabe asked for in her letter to them. So she's satisfied with it, and she's a pretty badass Bernie supporter and Kimberly Ellis supporter. So I'm willing to see what comes of this process. But we are keeping our options open. The delegates are considering doing a lawsuit because of the way the process was not followed. Kimberly Ellis is not the only person who has standing in this issue. But it's no coincidence to me that Eric Bauman was a $145,000 a year advisor to Anthony Rendon. So the two of them are thick as thieves. And in fact, the irony is Eric Bauman talked about the whole campaign. He was talking about how he has the connections to get single payer. He has the connections to ban fracking because he's so well entrenched with the leadership and all the players in the California Democratic Party. Well, what did he do after this? He released this milquetoast statement saying that he was disappointed that, Anthony Rendon didn't let this go forward to the Rules Committee, and that was it. Do you think for a minute that Eric Bauman is calling up, Rendon and Brown and Lara and Atkins and Ben Allen and all these people that he has all these great relationships with and saying, let's strategize on how we can move this thing forward? No, I don't think so, because I think ultimately all they want to do is look good on this. And this is why I am so disgusted with party politics and why I think basically that revolution is the only answer. Those valve turners, I went to see those valve turners. Many of them are middle-aged. Some of them are even senior citizens. And they are now facing 40 years to life sentences for what they bravely did. There were like 5 of them across the Canada-U.S. border. They found out where all the valves were to turn on and off the tar sands oil from going through the pipelines in America. And they made a plan to simultaneously turn them all off. And after they did that, well, actually, right before they did that, they called Keystone Pipeline and all the other pipelines to tell them they were going to do this so that the pipes wouldn't burst. So they gave them the notification. And then they called the police and waited 15 minutes for them to come and arrest them. Now, that's the kind of balls that I think it's going to take. And Chris Hedges talks about this all the time when he says that all the institutions that are supposed to defend us, he wrote a great book called Death of the Liberal Class, when he talks about how all the institutions that were supposed to defend the 99%, the Democratic Party, unions, the media, the universities, they've all been either neutered or co-opted. I look at how Planned Parenthood and SEIU submitted statements in defense of Rendon's decision. SEIU supposedly has single payer as one of its goals. Planned Parenthood is a whole nother story, which I'm going to do a video on. Planned Parenthood takes money, they took money from Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Kaiser, all 3 major players here in California. I also had a theory that maybe if single payer got passed, we wouldn't need Planned Parenthood because it would be provided by regular health care providers. I was corrected to say that they would be, as a nonprofit, they would just be one of the providers like any doctor or hospital or clinic, but perhaps their reimbursement rates would be less. Who knows? All I know is that Planned Parenthood was on that call, that indivisible call to save the ACA. They have never once supported single payer. In fact, they also were against One Care Colorado and defeated that when it was on the ballot last year in Colorado. I was told that they're also against the Massachusetts single payer plan. I haven't researched that. But Planned Parenthood, Cecile Richards, she's making over $700,000 a year to be a president of a nonprofit organization. In 2014, her compensation was almost $1 million due to a lot of deferred benefits that she got. Sometimes these people in the nonprofit industrial complex act just as bad as business. And we know that they have traded, the unions have also traded pressure for access to get a seat at the table. And these union leaders are not always representing the interests of the rank and file. And Gilbert Feliciano has a great petition that I'm going to put in the comments to LaFonza Butler, who's head of the SEIU. He is involved in his local chapter, and he is saying that she needs to represent the people and fight for single payer and not issue these stupid statements backing up these corporate Democrats who say they're for single payer but really are not. So we need to be contacting our unions, we need to be contacting Planned Parenthood and tell them that they need to support single payer health care. We need to also contact our local chambers of commerce. Even Warren Buffett came out in favor of single payer the other day. His partner, Charlie Munger, who is a Republican from Pasadena, has long supported single payer because healthcare costs are killing businesses. GM spends more on healthcare than they do on steel. So there is no person in America, except for if you are in big insurance or big pharma, that should be opposed to single payer. So I'm going to wrap up now by saying, please share this video. Call Anthony Rendon, call Ricardo Lara, call Tony Atkins, call Jerry Brown, call SEIU, call Planned Parenthood, call your local Chamber of Commerce, and be an emissary for single payer. It's not too much to learn about this. Go and speak to community groups. Go speak to your local Democratic clubs. Go speak to your environmental organizations, whatever group you're a part of. We all need to be in this together. We have to get out of our silos. We can't have the people fighting fracking over here and the people fighting single payer over there. We have to work together. And I'm telling you, if it doesn't work through legislation, you know, it's going to make revolution inevitable. And ultimately, I think that's what we're going to need to have. We have 50% of Americans now who make $30,000 a year or less. We have 50% Americans that are one accident, illness, or job loss away from dire poverty. You know, we have people that are cutting their medication, their pills in half because they have to decide between buying medication, buying their prescription drugs, or buying food. And then we have Big Pharma, who's addicting people, who caused an entire heroin epidemic in this country because they addicted people to OxyContin. I was reading something today, you can trace this all back to when OxyContin was introduced, and Vicodin, and all of these opiates that they have now addicted the entire country to, and people are living in such despair that they have no hope. There's no jobs. We've outsourced all the jobs through NAFTA and other free trade agreements. We've made college so unaffordable that everybody's a debt slave. You know, people are paying more and more and more in interest because the financial sector has become the biggest sector of our economy, and they're securitizing everything. They're now securitizing rental leases. I mean, this is outrageous. First, they blow up the housing bubble. Everybody loses their home. The banks do not reduce the principal, and yet when they have to put the house back on the market, they reduce the cost of the house. Why don't they do that? Because if they reduce the principal, it's not a tax write-off for them. But when they release the house back on the market, worth $200,000 less, they can write that off. So it's just a big numbers game. And then the Blackstone Group, which is an investment firm, buys up all these houses and starts renting them out to people, increasing the rates. Same thing with Airbnb. They come in, they buy, these apartment owners that they used to have rental units. They're now kicking the tenants out and using their units for Airbnb. The sharing economy, this is a whole other digression I can go off on. The sharing economy like Uber and Airbnb, you know, these people are making pittance. And the people who make money are the people who invented the app and the people in Silicon Valley and the venture capitalists. These people are making a shit ton of money and off the labor of ordinary people. I can't tell you how many people I know who are Uber drivers now and Airbnb hosts because this is the only way they can survive in this economy. Watch this video, The Crisis of Capitalism by David Harvey. It is excellent. It talks about how in the last 35 years, well, before World War II After World War II in 1980, in the war between labor and capital, labor won, but since 1980, capital's been winning. And how have they done that? They've done that through credit. Everybody has been able to live and have a middle-class lifestyle on credit cards and refinancing their house. But now they're tapped out, and they're coming, and the price is being paid. So nobody has a middle-class lifestyle. Everybody has a lower-class lifestyle. And this situation has got to end. I'm sorry. I know that I'm going on, but it's just making me madder and madder, and we've got to do something about it. Thank you, and have a great weekend. Keep fighting.